All right, let's continue with our Beyond the Beat series. Things you should know beyond making beats. So, unfortunately, this is one of those things that I wish that we were in the studio and I could actually demonstrate and have you guys play around with. But we're going to get into the basics of recording, what you need, what all those pieces of equipment do, and things like that. So, as we defined previously, sound is essentially vibrations in the air. They're sound waves. And how do you capture those sound waves and get them into a computer or onto tape back in the day or whatever? So, in order to record, the basics of what you would need are a microphone in order to capture an actual acoustic sound like a voice or a guitar or drums, as opposed to an electric guitar that you could plug directly in. You would need a preamplifier to take what is really a very, very low level of electrical charge out of a microphone, needs to be amplified. And then you need to have that convert into the digital domain. So when we talk about analog, that is the real world sound, and that sound needs to get converted into zeros and ones into the digital domain. And of course, you would need a computer that's running some digital audio workstation software like Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, whatever. So in my little schematic here, or images, we have the same microphone kind of at the artist end of things. On the top here, we have the Great River MV2. It's a 2-channel microphone preamp. You have one channel over here, and then you can pretty much see, even from a distance, that it's the same buttons and knobs and stuff. So you have 1 and 2. Over here, this is a separate digital analog to digital converter, A to D converter. This is made by Avid. It is what we have in the studio. It's called the HDIO, and it has 16 inputs and 16 outputs. So even though this only has 2, we could get another 14 of these or other types, which we do have, and I'll get to that. And we can record up to 16 inputs at once. It's all dependent on the number of preamps you have, obviously the number of microphones you have, but how many channels of conversion do you have? We actually have 2 of these, so we can do up to 32 channels at once. And then, of course, we have a computer that's running the best software that you can get. More kind of at home, and if I really quickly, let me see, 16, 18, 22, 28. We have about 36 mic preamps at school. Anyways, at home or in the lab, in the computer lab at school, we all have what are these kind of all-in-one type of interfaces. Very, very basic type of piece of gear. So you start with your microphone, you plug it into the interface. In this one unit, you have 1 mic preamp, 1 instrument preamp, as well as the 2 channels of analog to digital conversion. And that just plugs right into your computer. So, you have your all-in-one solution that can sit, literally I have one on my desk right now, as opposed to, quite larger, more cumbersome setup. What are the benefits of both of these things, or either? Obviously, this one's ease of use. It is portable. I stick it in my backpack. I went on vacation for a couple days. I took it with me. I recorded some things. It's cheap. This thing's about $100. This unit, the Great River MV2, I believe, is about $3,000 for 2 channels. The HDIO, I think, goes between $8,000 and $10,000. So what's the difference? Mic preamps, there's a level of quality. There's a level of sonic coloration that you get from particular mic preamps. And most professional studios have a variety of mic preamps because you want to choose the right microphone for the right instrument, the right preamp for that microphone and or for that instrument and all that type of thing. Now, in terms of the number of channels of conversion, yes, there's quality of conversion, but the number of channels is huge. The fact that we can do 32 channels at once versus literally 2 pays for itself in a professional studio situation, especially if you're going to record like live bands. We use upwards of 8 to 10 microphones just on the drum set. So you can't do that on this piece of gear here. This is an XLR cable. It's a 3-pin cable, and I have it here because that's obviously what you plug the microphone into the preamp. But we'll get to that in a minute because it also carries phantom power. So this is basically what you would need. If you're going to start recording, doing some basic stuff at home, you want to have a mic for some vocals, maybe plug your guitar in, you're great with a Focusrite Solo for $100. If you want to get really pristine quality, more inputs and outputs, you're going to need to change it up. Let's talk about microphones a little bit. The job of the microphone is to convert those vibrations, that natural sound, into an electrical signal. That electrical signal is super, super low powered, and it does need to be amplified. And I'm going to kind of keep coming back to that via the preamplifier. There are several types of microphones: ribbon, tube, PZM. The two main categories of microphone are dynamic and condenser. Major difference? Well, let's get to what kind of how these work anyways to begin with. So picture-wise, we have over here, this is an SM57. This is a dynamic microphone, a Shure SM57, a Shure SM58. This is also a dynamic microphone. This is an AKG D112. We use it on the kick drum and have used it on things like the tuba or on a bass amp. These microphones have a diaphragm, a little piece of that moves with the air vibrations. That diaphragm is wrapped in coil, in metal coil that moves within a magnetic field. So as that diaphragm is moving in the coil, it creates an electrical charge, super low level. And that electrical charge essentially converts your voice or your signal into sound that can be captured. A condenser microphone is more responsive. You know, when we talk about like the frequency range of microphones, a condenser is going to capture a clearer, wider range of sound. The diaphragm on these are charged by electricity. It's not a magnetic field. And in order to charge it, you have to engage what's called phantom power, and that's 48 volts of electricity. How does that electricity get to the microphone in order to power it? By the way, condenser, 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 condenser. Not all condensers are large diaphragm. These are small diaphragm condensers. You can kind of see in this picture the probably good inch circle of and this one as well, of the diaphragm. Well, phantom power comes from the mic pre. So over here on this unit, you have a button right here that says 48 volts. I think it's that button. It's somewhere on here. And on this unit, there's a button on either one that says phantom. So every mic pre is going to have a phantom power button. Every interface these days is going to have a phantom power button. Condensers tend to be used on a lot of things, but when we kind of imagine a vocalist in a studio, we imagine a large diaphragm condenser mic. You don't tend to see large diaphragm condensers on stages with live situations because they're so sensitive and they can pick up, or they're susceptible to feedback and things like that. We'll get more into that when we talk about polar patterns, which is coming up right now. And by the way, one more time, if I didn't say this already, the phantom power is actually carried through the mic cable on one of the pins. So when this is plugged in from the mic into the preamp and you engage phantom power, that power is floating back through the mic cable to electrify the diaphragm. Polar patterns. So microphones have what are called polar patterns. Some mics are fixed, meaning they only have one polar pattern, and some mics are switchable. Of the mics, we have all these mics, that's why I have these pictures. This is an AKG 414. It is switchable. There's a switch here, or buttons actually, that works through a number of different polar patterns. This Shure KS, I forget the number of this one, fixed. Neumann TLM 103 fixed. This is an interesting one because these are small diaphragm again. These are studio projects. These different mic heads are the different polar patterns. So you actually have to physically change the head in order to change the polar pattern. All right, but let's talk about polar patterns. It defines essentially where the mic is listening to, or how the mic is hearing the sounds from different directions. And again, some can be switched, meaning that you can change the pattern in one microphone, and others you can't change. I'd say the most common polar pattern is called cardioid. It is this drawing essentially. It is most sensitive from the front, just a touch from behind, but not very much, which is why you would see like this microphone is a cardioid pattern, which really the behind is just more from the sides, and you get very, very little. So on a stage, the singer is singing into the microphone, and you really don't need to worry about, as much about the guitar amp getting in here or the monitors getting back in there. So again, most common is cardioid. Omnidirectional hears from all sides, 360 degrees. Imagine one microphone and 5 or 6 singers doing backup vocals, all standing around this one microphone. Everyone would be heard equally if they're the same distance away. So uses for omnidirectional: choir, room, to pick up the room of a drum set and just kind of stick an omnidirectional microphone somewhere in front of that drum set. You're going to be hearing the front. You're going to be hearing how sound bounces off the side of the walls, which could be a bad thing, but it could be cool. Hypercardioid is even narrower, a narrower pickup pattern than the cardioid, but it picks up more from behind. So it's kind of an interesting kind of mixed bag. On a stage, for example, because it's more directional from the front, the singer really needs to have good mic technique and make sure not to go off axis, meaning away from the mic, so that you're no longer hearing the voice as much. But it's a little bit more susceptible from behind in terms of other sounds getting into the mic. Again, probably more used for stage situations. The figure 8 is actually a really interesting one in some ways, depending how you use it, because what it does is you can kind of hear equally from the front and the back. And again, the only mic that we have in our locker that does that is the AKG 414. So imagine, maybe 2 people on one side or the other singing into the mic. It's actually a really cool technique I don't want to get into right now, but it's called mid-side, where you actually face the microphone towards a wall, like away from the source, and you can pick up sound on both sides of it, kind of do a stereo recording. But in any case, those are the 4 kind of main polar patterns. And we're probably up at around 15 minutes. I wanted to try and keep it to that, but we're going to keep going. I actually, just because preamps are so important, I have 2 slides on it. They're somewhat repetitious, so I'm going to hopefully not go through everything about it. So every mixing board has at least one preamp, if not hundreds or 100 of them. All right, you have to have a preamp in order to record something, anything. A microphone signal is very, very low in terms of its electrical charge. And what we record at what's called line level, which is, anywhere, let's just call it 50 decibels of gain. The preamp brings the mic signal or mic level signal up to line level. It adds gain. So essentially think of it as volume, but it is and it isn't. You're adding, by turning this knob when you plug in your microphone, you're adding between 30 and 60 decibels of gain, amplitude. An electrical instrument like a bass guitar or an electric guitar that you plug into an instrument level preamp starts out louder than a microphone and will only need, maybe 20 to 30 decibels of gain, but it still needs to be amplified. So at school, these interfaces have two preamps, one mic and one line or instrument. They're not actually the same. They're not quite the same, but basically. In the studio, this is our mixing console. It's not the interface actually, it's a controller. This mixing console has 16 mic preamps and 16 line level preamps. We also have rack mounted preamps. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in these 3 different units. I have another 8 in another one. Doesn't matter. This little piece of information here, if you put a mic into a line level preamp, it's going to be super quiet because a line level preamp is expecting a louder signal, even louder than an instrument. Something like a synthesizer, a CD player, those types of things that are already line level don't need as much amplification as a microphone. But if you plug a line level signal into a mic preamp, you're going to overblow it and it's going to be distorted because that line level signal is already amplified and doesn't need all that much gain from the preamp. Let's see, this is a little bit more on mic level versus line level and whatnot. So a mic level, again, very little power. In order to get it up to a level that's usable, it needs gain, and it gets it from the preamp. A line level component, like a mixer, keyboard, or other piece of outboard gear, is about 1,000 times more powerful, and therefore needs less power. And an instrument is basically in the middle. So again, you can plug, and in fact, let's go look at these for a second. You can plug an instrument like an electric guitar or an electric bass into these preamps. They have separate inputs for that. And they kind of go through a transformer that kind of converts it. And it needs much, much less gain from the preamp than the microphone would. So if I plug my bass into here, this is not going to be at 1 o'clock. It's going to be more like at 7 or 8. And again, already have that in here. All right, let's pause there.